The best thing you can do if you're interested in HIT is get really good at getting yourself into good shape. And then if you want to take it on as a business, which I'd say be really cautionary about, because PT is a hard graft business. It is full of ups and downs. It is hard work. And you can be the greatest trainer in the world, and that doesn't mean you're going to be rich. You know what I mean? It is a hard, high failure career.
Welcome to Corporate Warrior, the podcast that brings you the best advice on how to improve your health, optimize performance, and maximize productivity. With your host, Lawrence Neal.
This episode is brought to you by the Resistance Exercise Conference, the science and application of strength training for health and human performance. Would you like to learn from the top strength training researchers, network and connect with other exercise professionals from all over the world, join a welcome reception on a Friday night to build relationships with other strength training professionals, experience an early morning workout from an expert trainer to kickstart your Saturday, and get inspired, rejuvenated, and focused on your strength training business? I certainly do, and that is why I am attending and interviewing all of the speakers at the event. The Resistance Exercise Conference will be held on the 9th and 10th of March 2018 in Minneapolis, Minnesota at the Commons Hotel. To get 10% off your entry fee, head on over to resistanceexerciseconference.com, click the registration button, and enter Corporate Warrior 10 in the promo code field in PayPal. I'm very excited about this, and I've wanted to attend for years. Sign up now at resistanceexerciseconference.com and get 10% off with promo code Corporate Warrior 10, and I look forward to meeting you in person. Hey guys, I am Lawrence Neal and welcome to another episode of Corporate Warrior. I hope you are doing lovely today. This podcast teaches you how to optimize your health, exercise, business, and lifestyle. I've interviewed Body by Science author Dr. Doug McGuff, exercise scientists like Dr. James Fisher, New York Times bestselling authors like Gary Taubes, successful entrepreneurs like Noah Kagan, and many, many more. Today's guest is Gary Knight. Gary is a rather outspoken, high-intensity trainer who I started following on Facebook and Instagram a while ago, and I always loved how he cuts through all of the bullshit. He walks the walk, he's in great shape himself, and he's recorded a load of videos on YouTube and Instagram of him training people using high-intensity training methods and things like free weights and machines. He's a great trainer. He's successfully grown a client base in the high-level business exec market and has also built an online coaching business helping people transform their appearance. I absolutely loved recording this. It was so much fun. We both got to really geek out on high-intensity training and high-intensity personal training. We talk about what is high-intensity training, how do you measure it, how does high-intensity training improve your health, Gary's personal transformation, and his controversial McShredded challenge where he lost a ton of body fat and improved health markers with a McDonald's-only diet for 50 days. That's right, McDonald's only, not something I recommend, but an interesting anecdote nonetheless. We talk about how to become an effective high-intensity personal trainer, including how do you motivate clients, in-person training versus online coaching and how to marry the two, and how to teach high-intensity training to what Gary calls normies. That's people who have no idea what the hell high-intensity strength training is. This is packed with useful info whether you're a PT or not, and you're just trying to learn more about high-intensity training and how to make it more effective for you. It's really entertaining, and I'm really excited for you to listen to this. Gary is also giving away a free objective strength measurement guide to Corporate Warrior listeners, which is complete with high-intensity training log sheets to help you start making tactical gains. To get that free download, you'll need to go to the blog post, which is on corporatewarrior.co/Gary. So again, that's corporatewarrior.co/Gary. For all the show notes and links for this episode and all episodes, please go to corporatewarrior.org, where you will find a full list of all of my podcast episodes. Don't forget to wait till the end of this for your free gift from me. And now I give you the high-intensity trainer, Gary Knight. Gary, welcome to Corporate Warrior. It's a pleasure having you on the show, mate.
Thank you for having me, Lawrence. I'm happy to be here.
Most welcome. As we were talking just now, I was reading all of your wonderful blog posts on Medium, and I learned that you used to live in a mining town in Australia, and you were actually a manual labourer in an underground mine for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, I was. So
Cool.
I was an electrician, but when you're an electrician in the underground environment, you're basically a manual labourer with a little bit of technicality at the start and finish of the job. So you're hurling heavy cables that are sort of 120 mil thick, full of copper, full of steel wire armour. They weigh a ton, and we sort of jokingly refer to ourselves as cable monkeys. So we run around the underground hanging heavy things.
How did you make the transition from that career to becoming a trainer?
Oh, well, to be honest, like I started off my life actually as a school teacher. So I used to teach English and history, and I only did it for 2 years, but the mining boom kicked off in Australia. So I hopped out to there. And then the transition out of that to becoming a trainer was pretty much me and my partner. We wanted to live somewhere a bit more exciting. We'd live very remote in very small parts of the world in Australia. So we did the opposite, came to London. And once I found myself in London, I kind of had to, pick and choose how I'd make my bread. And I'm not really interested in going and working behind a bar after sort of making 6 figures a year in the mine. So I kind of had to do something I was either passionate about. And I didn't really have any option in terms of hopping in a mine or doing any kind of related work. So what I was taught in the mines was very sort of specific to that job, not easy to port across. So I was excellent in the gym, good results on myself, good results with my partner and a few friends when I was in the mines. And then I just thought, well, I'm almost pretty much an expert in this stuff already just from my own application and self-study. Let's see what I can do in the trenches. So hopped into the trenches and high-intensity training meets Clapham.
Clapham's a beautiful place. I used to live near there. I miss it very much. Okay, cool. So how long have you been doing personal training for now as like a full-time job?
Yeah, so it's pretty much only a little over a year. So September was the 12-month mark. So now we're in December. So yeah, getting on there to the what would that be? 15 months or something like that.
Cool. And then the all-important question that was submitted by the wise Jay Vincent: how much do you bench currently?
Yeah, so I don't bench at all, and I haven't really done a bench press in the good part of a decade. Probably done a decline bench press once or twice in the decade, but I tend to stay away from it because I find it's more trouble than it's worth. I have a fair bit of differences between the strength of the left and right limb. So in order to kind of deal with that, I always choose exercises that will sort of measure me independently on both sides, just so that my dominant side doesn't get ahead of my weaker side. And I just find it's very hard to perform a bench press properly. And it's kind of, you get trapped under the bar if it goes wrong. And I just try to stay away from it. So my concern is it safe and can I measure it? So as long as it satisfies those things, I do it. And I don't think the bench press is the best choice in terms of chest stimulation or safety. So no bench press. Don't even care.
Good answer. Sorry, Jay. I know that wasn't what you were hoping for, but I know it kind of was in a strange sort of way. So in fact, you probably didn't think I was going to even ask that question. Okay, so let's talk about high intensity training. So talk to me about how you got into high intensity training.
Okay, so the first time, so the origin story, or when I first, when HIT first sort of crossed my path, was when I was very young. So when I first started getting into sort of, looking after my body a bit, I sport as a kid. I was about 16, I think, at the time, and I just started doing like circuit training in the local surf club gym, just as part of my training for sort of surf lifesaving, which is kind of like, think of it like triathlon, but beach related craft and sports. So I used to do the circuit training in there. I picked up a copy of Arnold Schwarzenegger's, famous bodybuilding book. And I also picked up a copy of Mike Mentzer's High Intensity Training the Mike Mentzer Way. I read both and picked the dumb one. So I ended up on the high volume route. which wasn't terrible. I mean, it bore fruit, especially when I entered my university years, but it stalled pretty quickly. But I had read the Mike Mentzer book from about the age of 16, and literally it had all gone over my head. I had no idea what I was reading, didn't make any sense. And you're just too young and too inexperienced at that age to kind of piece it all together. So it wasn't until a few years later that I'd sort of tapped out my beginner gains in my late teens, early 20s. Just wasn't growing no matter how much time I put in. And that's when I started to sort of get a bit more interested in how do I move this needle, how do I go further and optimize. And that's when I sort of had the book with me, picked it up, read it again. And interestingly, in the meantime, I had sort of followed a lot of philosophy, got into objectivism a little bit, which I've moved away from, but those two things tie together very well because Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism was kind of the philosophy of Mentzer. And so the way he spoke and talked was very similar to Ayn Rand. And so now I'd kind of got used to that way of speaking, very logical. I was able to kind of take on Mike's lessons a lot better and just went straight into it.
Cool. How old are you?
I'm 31. I'm about to turn 32 on the 12th.
Oh, right. It's hard to tell. I wasn't sure if you were. If I had to guess, I would have said sort of mid late 20s. So
yeah, decent. Keeping it. Got a fresh haircut the other day. That's why.
That's what it is. That's what it is. That's interesting because obviously you do hear a lot about high intensity training. Advocates tend to lean towards objectivism in Ayn Rand's work. I must admit, I haven't actually taken a deep dive into that myself. Only learnt about it through maybe a few like YouTube presentations and just discussions on the podcast. But clearly, it's something that I should at least learn about. Even if it's not something I'm going to, replace as my main philosophy. So, okay, talk to me about, I mean, the way you come across on social media on high intensity training is very interesting. You normally, leave some very, very profound and useful comments, I noticed. And, our conversations have always been really enjoyable on social media. I love bouncing ideas off you and getting your perspective, which I find helps ground me. So can you talk about, what is high intensity training from your perspective? And then we can go into things like effort and momentary muscular failure and obviously that short list you sent me.
Yeah, so I guess when I first got into HIT, and I think most people that get into HIT, it's this idea of intensity. So hard work sort of replaces faffing about. If you work really, really hard up to the point of failure, that's kind of the greatest stimulus you can give your muscles for change, give them a reason to change. But now that I've gotten a little bit older, I kind of pitch HIT a little bit differently. I actually see the main parts of HIT I sort of stick my flag to is measurement. So no matter what you do, I want to know how do you measure it and how are you sure of that measurement and can you prove that you're moving in the right direction? So I'm really focused on how can I assess strength in an objective way that relates to muscular size. So I find the big advantage of HIT is not sort of getting bogged down on one set to failure, look how little I can get away with, which is often the kind of bragging point of HIT, but it's more how do I measure human performance? How do I calculate strength in a way that relates to size? So for me, I'm very much interested in teaching myself and teaching others how to tell the truth when they lift. And so I'm very much into the cadence again. So periods of time I've moved away from focusing on the cadence and just worrying about failure. But I think I'm right back at the start with just the classic, 4-4 cadence that Mentzer recommended because it's a scientific method. If you can perform every rep exactly the same, range of motion exactly the same, path of motion the same, and go to the point of failure, that's a really high-res image of what somebody's capable of strength-wise in a way that tracks very closely with size. And I feel if you can just stick to that basic measurement, you can be really, really tactical. You come to wonderful understanding. So instead of sort of worrying about all the literature and whether you're following the holy book, it just becomes a case of like test yourself, measure yourself properly, be honest about it, and sort of go on a journey of discovery and see where the numbers lead, and just instead of radically changing your routine all the time, just change things slowly, be very conservative about the changes you make and just see how it bears fruit in terms of training.
Cool. Okay. So that's interesting. So you are you kind of stick to the kind of 4/4 cadence. Is that so? Obviously, that becomes difficult to maintain as one becomes more fatigued, because then the cadence stretches out. So I guess you're allowing for that to happen and still measuring time under load. Is that correct? Or
yeah. So like I won't. I mean, obviously a cadence and a rep range is a proxy time under load, but I won't sit there with a stopwatch and get bogged down on it. I like to see it in terms of what's not the most accurate, but what's an effective level of resolution in which to approach HIT. So the 4/4 cadence is really, really handy because it basically eliminates momentum. You don't get an opportunity to kind of rush a rep or drop a rep. So it keeps you sort of moving nice and evenly, nice and controlled. And as you approach failure, it doesn't really matter if it takes longer than 4 to achieve the rep. What you're saying is that the minimum standard is moving in 4, lowering in 4. If you go a little bit slower, it doesn't affect the measurement in a way that throws you down the wrong path. Now, if you do a rep that's in, say, takes 2 seconds to push it, and the last few reps you went fast, you would start putting the weight up before you're actually ready. So if I could kind of reverse engineer everyone's journey, like often what I'll say to people is say, listen, I've got a well-developed back and set of biceps, and for the most part, my close grip pull down has determined that size. So I can pull down 100 kilos on the machine with a 4/2/4 cadence, pulling in 4, hold for 2, lower for 4. And if you want to replicate my size, well, you have to be able to do that performance. You need to get that number in the test. And so if you're starting your journey and you can only do, 10 reps of 40 kilos with the 4/2/4 cadence, well, it's a game of inches where you have to, go up to 45 next week. You might get 6 reps. The workout after that, you might get 10. Then you go to 50. And it's just that game of inches. So what I'm interested in is, when is the right time to move the weight up so that you can observe the good form? And essentially, it's just a journey of getting up the weight classes with solid form that you know has a relationship to size, and not jumping the gun early. So every time you try to sort of be a bit of a gym hero and just push for the number on paper, that's when you run into trouble form-wise. So again, it's just good quality reps, knowing when you're ready at the top of the rep range to jump up weight next week. And if you can just do those things, you tend to run out of trouble. And it's kind of humbling. It means that that progress isn't super fast, but it's really dependable. You know what I mean? If you find the facts, you can deal with the facts.
Mm. So do you think that, it sounds like you think that it is important to increase load to increase someone's muscular gain, that one can't just go to momentary muscular failure regardless of load to produce that? Is that your belief?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's basically you're as big as what you can handle in a moderate to heavy rep range. But it's really that simple. So if you can't do pull downs with 100 kilos with a 4/2/4 cadence for 10 reps, guess what? You don't have a giant back. You don't have a big back. You don't have big biceps. And that's the end of the story. So when people sort of come to you looking for solutions, they're like, oh, how do I develop this? And what's a good exercise that targets that? I'm almost just, offensive in the sense that I go, what's your pull down and what's your metric? So you're not strong. That's why you're small. Get strong on that exercise. So the path is always through. It's up the hill. It's not around. You know what I mean? So that's kind of, in a nutshell, my approach to HIIT is that it's really, really simple. Like, I bring it back down to basics, basic fundamentals. If you're weak, you're not big,
What about how does this translate into like body weight workouts? So for instance, if one's doing a chin up and they're doing a chin up to failure, are you saying that if they don't either, I guess, take a Project Creators approach, like make it more challenging / increase the weight through gaining one's own weight or adding weight to a weight belt, that you're not going to achieve gains in size and strength? Is that what you think?
Well, I mean, it depends on the totality of your workout. So, I mean, obviously with, say, Project Kratos, you're doing I think it's where it would be a weak routine was probably not the upper body. It's probably the legs. So the ability to load up the legs on something heavy like a leg press probably caps the amount of body weight you can add to yourself. So, doing piston squats can only get you so far, and then you need to add weight. And same with the chin up. Like if you only weigh sort of, 60, 70 kilos, you can be the greatest person in the world at chin ups, but essentially that load is not going to be sufficient to stimulate more size. So at the end of the day, like those fundamental questions of how do you measure it, how do you increase the load, will determine your size. So, like my body weight being about 100 kilos at the moment, like if I get 6 chin-ups, that's awesome. I'm very, very happy. But say if you're only like a 65, 70 kilo guy and you do 10 chin-ups, well, it's not that heavy really, is it? So at the end of the day, you have to, you can slow the cadence down a little, but that'll only take you so far. I think at the end of the day, you need to overload your body, Yeah,
it's interesting because the only reason I would challenge you is because I've not seen sufficient evidence to show that you need to overload progressively. And obviously, like I've spoken to a few people on the show who don't do that. They just think that, so long as you're training to failure, you're going to get what you can get. But you really don't believe that, do you? Based on what you've said. Is that fair enough?
Well, I guess the question is it's really hard when people describe their journeys and what their results are, because it's very hard to get, empirical about these things. So often when we talk about our workouts and how we tried this and that worked and this is going good for me, most people don't really know. Even if you're like a good HIIT practitioner, there's so many variables at play. So it's really hard to kind of take the anecdotal sort of story about that and put it in context. So, I mean, if I train someone with a Project Kratos workout and I observed them over time and I watched them getting stronger at it, getting more reps and putting on size and body weight, I would take the position that it worked. But until I sort of see it or I've seen it myself, I don't feel comfortable sort of speaking about it. But it is my instinct that, if you can do slow controlled reps with big exercises that far exceed your body weight, well, you're going to be pretty big muscle wise. Whereas if you only get stuck at your body weight or less than your body weight, you're probably not going to be that big sort of pound for pound. So it's just a case of like, if you can demonstrate it. But there's nothing wrong with barbells and dumbbells and pull down machines. I just keep it really, really simple, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because like I can sit here and say, well, I did high intensity training on Med-X machines for a few years, and I found I just got to a point where I plateaued no matter how much I abbreviated my workouts or included more recovery days, and then obviously I ended up the Keys gym closed, and I ended up moving to body weight. And I don't know whether or not. So what I'm essentially saying is I've probably plateaued in terms of lean mass for years. Yet I would be interested, obviously, if I could increase that, but I don't believe that I can. Based on my own genetics and experience. But that being said, I might not have as high standards in terms of like empiricism and objective measurement as you do. So I may be a little bit lax there, and maybe I could. And people might be listening to this thinking, Lawrence, accept your genetic limits. We're hard gainers. But like, I do want to keep an open mind here. And it would be interesting to, there's other things we want to talk about, but like maybe we can talk offline, Gary, about a different training protocol that you might suggest, and maybe you could end up training me remotely.
Yeah, no worries.
But yeah, it's definitely food for thought. Okay, so talk to me about. I'm really interested in how you measure progress. So you've obviously spoken a little bit there about reps and if the weight's increasing and so on. But how do you measure improvement in your clients? Like, what tools do you use? What numbers are you looking at?
Okay, so very basic again. Like, the longer I've been at this, the more I keep returning back to kind of Mensa's principles for the most part. I think the guy trained a lot of people, and I think you just learn over time a kind of sweet spot that works with most people. So in the past, I've done sort of like 2-4 cadences, but I just find that moving in 2 seconds on the concentric, it just leads to shitty reps at the end of the set. And when you have bad reps at the end of the set where you've used a bit too much speed and leverage to get the job done, you end up jumping the weight class before you're ready. So I just use the 6 to 10 upper body rep range and the 12 to 20 lower body rep range, and I use the 4-4 or the 4-2-4 cadences basically to let me know when it's sensible to up the weight. At the end of the day, you got to realize the limits of how high the resolution can be when you measure. So even though I'll describe what I do as high resolution, it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than what typically goes on in a gym, which is no measurement at all, reps all over the place, form all over the place. So you got to kind of 80-20 it when it comes to like good form. But, if someone can produce 10 smooth 4-4 reps of a pull down, 50 kilos, well, next week we're doing 55. And when you can do 10 smooth 4-4 reps of that, well, we're going to 60. And it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. And if they're not, I expect those increments to be like between sort of 1 and 3 rep improvements with every single workout. That's typically what I see for a good 3 to 6 months, before we run into problems. So as long as they can do that, we'll it's pretty typical. So I've moved gyms recently, but most of the clients that started with me there, they're up 15 or 20 kilos on their chest press in sort of 7 or 8 workouts, which, that's good. That's awesome. That's your job. So I don't get too bogged down in it, but I just want those reps to be smooth and controlled. And it's really, really easy to see when you're training someone, but sometimes when you're training yourself, you can kind of deceive yourself a little bit about how good your reps are. But again, it's not getting too bogged down in the number. It's about sort of, if you're working with a pin-loaded machine, it's just getting that pin lower and lower down the stack so you're using more weight, and just making sure that within that rep range, the reps are quality. You know what I mean? Quality reps tell you when it's time to move up. Anytime you try and jump the gun by letting sloppy form come into it, you end up trying to get to the bottom of the rep range with bad form, and then you're just in a whole world of trouble. So it's just really basic stuff, eh? So bread and butter reps.
Yeah, and just to reconcile this, and sorry to keep beating this dead horse, I'm just thinking for my own benefit, I probably I know I'd made excellent progress at the beginning of my foray into high intensity training in terms of lifting more loads over a progressive period. And I believe I probably maxed out after a couple of years, maybe even a year. And then it's just tiny increments, as they all say. You don't improve forever, or you do, but it's tiny, it's very, very marginal. So it's probably therefore fair to say that I got all the gains for my personal genetic limits way back, and then now it's just tiny incremental improvements. But the stuff I do now, whilst I may not be overloading with more resistance, I'm able to at least maintain what I've built. But do you believe, I know you probably need more information, you probably need to see me training and what have you, that I probably have more to go? Or do you think that, based on what you just heard, that actually I've probably...
This is what I love about data. If you can trust someone's measurement, or I can measure them personally and have time with them over a 3 to 6 month period, it just gives you the facts, you know what I mean? So you see it in the numbers where people's, genetic limits are, how fast they progress, and the difference between people can be really, really extraordinary. Some people just fly through the weight stack. They get strong so fast, big so fast, and other people it's just 1 or 2 reps every week, and that's not bad. That's a good result, because when left to their own devices, they don't even train, or they don't push for limits. So when you start measuring, you get to find out. So I don't like to come up to people and say, oh yeah, I can get you more gains. It's like I tell people I can measure you, and I will discover what your genetic limits are. That's the only thing I can promise. So I don't like to speak waffle or pretend like I can solve problems or deliver, the dream body to everybody. All I can do is measure you with really high accuracy, push you to your limits and find what those limits are. So it's important to be, even though in HIIT we know we've got the best style of training, but we need to be very, very humble about what we're doing. And that's why I like measurement. So instead of telling people all these promises, I just explain to them, listen, I can measure peak performance and I'll push it up as far as your genetics will allow me to, which is sort of what you'd call the delta. So how far from base camp you got. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. So what that journey is very, hyper personal. And, I've trained 47-year-old men that pretty much got as buff as me in 3 months. And then I've trained guys that are, in their 20s and 30s that it's just more like your body type, that they'll get that progress. They'll come a long way, but there'll just be limits. You know what I mean? You'll just max out at some point. And that's sort of, true of everyone.
Interesting. Man, actually, you weren't in Clapham when I was living in London. Well, you were, but you'd only been there how long you been living in London for, did you say?
Not even 2 years, hey? Okay. So it'd be like 2 years in February.
Okay, so small overlap, but yeah, if you'd have been there before, I would have definitely obviously found out about you through the podcast and social media, and definitely would have trained with you for sure, mate.
Decent.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about actually before we move on to your approach to health in general. You mentioned to me that you wouldn't mind touching on periodization, what you think about the concept of periodization. Do you want to just speak on that for a little bit? How you look?
Yeah. So if people check out the Medium blog I've got going. You can go to intensegains.com to find it. But basically, I really like to agitate the traditional sort of bodybuilding community by making fun of periodization. Because essentially, I see it ultimately as an admission that you're not tactical in your training. So you're deliberately sort of waving up factors of volume, intensity, frequency, almost in strange arbitrary manners that you don't even know what it relates to. It's just like a guess. You guess that this is harder, you guess that this is softer, and you bounce the thing up and down and sort of pray that in the fullness of time it produces results. And most of the people doing periodization aren't measuring a rep in anything that's high resolution like I would with a cadence. So how they measure themselves in the first place, it tells me that they don't even know. And then they know that volume and frequency kind of is adjusting up and down. And so at the end of all this process of, making a squiggly line where they go up and down, they kind of guess with their really bad tools that they've got somewhere. And when I listen to it, it sounds like nonsense. I don't know whether that's because I'm sort of grounded in thinking empirically, but it's telling me that, if you're overreaching and then underreaching to allow for recovery, why can't you just give the exact dose and the exact recovery every single time and just not guess? Why does the routine have to go on this crazy voyage of sets and reps and wonderfully complicated routines? It just screams at me, I can't measure this. I've got a mess in front of me. How could anybody possibly make sense of it? Yet it's the industry standard. So the second, it sounds mean, but the second someone says periodization, I go basic bitch. It's just nonsense to me. So it'll offend a lot of people, but I just don't care because, one proper set taken to failure with empirical cadence reps tells you a peak performance that relates to size. You rest a week, and when you come back, you produce 2 or 3 more reps. Look, you went forward, and then you're going to rest another week, and look, you went 2 or 3 more reps. Isn't that excellent? Why are we going to adjust anything and get off this progress train? Keep running with it until you find a limit. When we find a limit where you stall for 2 or 3 weeks in a row, it's usually not even the training split. It's usually, your client came to you and they didn't drink any water, or they had Prosecco's them before came to you with a hangover. So it's not even, an issue of the session. It's usually lifestyle factors get in the way, or they're getting a cold. So it's just my experience with myself and with clients that with a HIT protocol, you can run progress for months at a time, and you often don't even need to change the exercises. It's just, I just don't get periodization. I don't get volume training. It's chaos. You can't make sense of chaos. You have to fix things. I don't know. That's just me. I'll upset it. upset people, but whatever.
No, that was really well said, actually. I've not heard that said like that before. Perhaps because I haven't spoken about periodization with high intensity training advocates for at all, I don't think, actually, or for at least for a while. And yeah, I totally agree. Like if it's, and this is something that, I respect Brad and his work. And obviously I recently launched a part 2, which was really, I enjoyed putting together with Brad Schoenfeld. But when I first spoke to him about periodization, I said to him, can't you just take some more time off? Like, rather than reduce, rather than start playing around with loads and what have you, just take more time off. And because I'm thinking about it, like you just said, like fixing variables where you can, just makes more sense. So yeah, I would say I do align with you on that. Like, how can you measure it? And I think, and I'm not saying that Brad is one of those trainers, because Brad is probably far more objective than a lot of trainers, but I think a lot of personal trainers will take the concept of periodization and abuse it to, yeah, like you say, to sort of muddy the waters a little bit, and kind of hide their lack of progress with their clients potentially, which I've not thought about it like that before. So that's interesting. Okay, cool.
Well, I'll keep going a little bit with that. So I'll give a good example. So one of my online clients, Donnie, he's probably more of a hard gainer type like you as well. And we need to put a lot of food into him. But basically every time a program starts to stall with him, I pretty much just say add a rest day. And you install that extra rest day permanently, like you solve that window. So it's just a dose response cycle. And this idea that, you wave it up and down chaotically, it's nonsense. Put more rest in permanently and just let it happen. So the stronger you get, the more damage you're going to do to your body, and that's set to failure. And training to failure, it is hard and it needs a lot of recovery, because when you access those big fast twitch fibers, they take days to heal back up to normal and then several days to sort of super compensate. So, it's just those slow, steady changes, monitor and review. When you're doing periodization and all these fancy schemes, I mean, like what are you even tracking? It's just nonsense.
Well, this is interesting. So I think there might be, a lot of people that will listen to this are high intensity training advocates. They may even know of you. That sounds really harsh. Of course I know of you. But there will be some people who see that, your picture or the pictures that go up with this post, with this episode, and they'll be like, oh, that guy looks buff. I want to hear what he has to say. Now, this will be interesting. So just tell the listeners, how much do you train? Give some real kind of, because I know it's going to be mind blowing from their perspective. So how much do you train every week? What does a workout look like? How much muscle mass have you gained, et cetera, et cetera?
So I guess the best way to kind of describe how much of my results come from HIIT versus the period when I wasn't doing HIIT, I'll just sort of do a timeline of my body, I guess.
Yeah.
So like everyone, started with pretty much the Arnold Schwarzenegger bodybuilding routine, 4 to 5 sets, 4 to 5 exercises. I'm pretty sure from an early stage I instinctively go to failure. I was never one to kind of duck hard work, but I probably put on about 15 kilos of muscle in my first year of training at university on pretty bad food. Didn't put on a lot of fat. It was just really, really fast. So I wouldn't say I'm like a super easy gainer, but I'm definitely on that side of the fence. So very fortunate in that regard. But it did just completely stall. So it was like I got 2 years of progress and then I just couldn't budge. I just couldn't put on size. I couldn't put on weight. And basically faced with that question of, do I get smarter or take steroids? I chose to get smarter, which I probably regret now when you look at all the steroid muscle stars. They seem to get the whole world handed to them when they get on the gear, but I chose to be clean, so here I am trying to be as smart as I can be. So that's when I started looking back at Mensa and looking at lower volume. And the second you drop your training down, where you're only hitting 2 to 3 sessions a week, you immediately get all these windfall gains. And that's just because you're resting and recovering and you can heal further. But even then, with the sort of 3 sessions per week, at a certain point, maybe in my mid-20s, that would start to stall. So I've tried all sorts of splits, like the idealized routine, which is the two upper body workouts and two lower body workouts, and through the sort of productive years of my early 20s, it was just a three-way split, to be honest. But what I found is I was having 2 to 3 rest days between each of those sessions. So instead of hitting a body part once every 7 days, I was blowing it out to sort of 10 to 14 days between swings. And that was pretty much the sweet spot during my whole time in the mine. So I was working very hard, 4 days on, 4 days off, and just sort of training once during the 4 days on and twice during the 4 days off. 10 to 14 days between the same exercise, and that bore fruit for a long time. So at the moment, I'm not in the gym more than maybe 40 minutes a week, and that's probably pottering around a little bit, or if I accidentally train during peak time, it blows the window out. So sometimes I'll wait for a machine longer than my workouts take. So it's not about the time spent, it's about the delta, like how far from base camp are you on those basic metrics. So you don't need to spend a lot of time testing for that. So at the moment, I've gone back to the idealized routine. So that's the chest and back day, 4 to 7 days off, legs and abs, 4 to 7 days off, kind of the side delts, rear delts, and arms, and then 4 to 7 days off, legs again, rest and repeat, and just getting data on that again. But I have been doing I've even done like once a week for a while, and that was really productive too. So I find as long as it's 8 or 9 days between exercises, irrespective of the split, and my nutrition's good, I tend to just keep inching forward, even this late in my development. You know what I mean?
So just to be very clear, your workout at the moment is one workout every 4 to 7 days.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's it.
Because I think it's important to clarify that, because I think people still find that to be hard to believe. Even myself, I'm obviously not as muscular as you, but I've built a fair amount of muscle and I'm pretty shredded. So when I tell people, I only work out, well, at the moment it's twice a week, but at one point it was once a week, and my total workout time's about 6 minutes, and I looked probably very similar to I look now. So I just think, it's when you look at it like that, it's like, why wouldn't you do high intensity strength training? It's just a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think it's about breaking down perceptions, but because everyone comes from sports backgrounds and economic backgrounds, and they think do more work, graft, work really hard, spend a lot of time at your craft, and at the end of the day, you'll sort of max out. But I mean, as we know, HIIT's very tactical, and it's breaking this idea down that it's not time served, but it's kind of those small little windows of peak performance, and how far you can get the delta or the load you can use in those windows. How far from base camp. So, people will tell you, they're on German, high volume routines and all these silly things. And I'll just be like, well, what do you chest press? And they're chest pressing 60 kilos for 10 reps on the techno gym machine. And I'll just be like, well, you're not very strong, are you? So why are you doing 10 sets of that when all you need to do is go up a couple of reps every week and string it together for 12 weeks and you'll be a changed man? So HIIT and my approach to HIIT's just, I just cut you down really quickly by just saying, how strong are you with a cadence? And that tells me everything I need to know about the effectiveness of your routine.
How do you, we'll come on to more about your personal training approach in a sec, but how do you think about, when someone's trying to gain muscle, from a calorie perspective when it comes to diet? Do you tend to advocate, maybe 200 extra calories beyond maintenance, or do you really, how do you think about that? And what's your kind of recommendations?
So when it comes to training and nutrition and anything in life, we can be the textbook guy, or we can be the guy that writes things down, measures them, and see what happens and change it as we go. So you can read all sorts of fancy calculations about your basal metabolic rate and how much you should eat. But with most clients, I just, take a rough guesstimate and go, can you accurately hit 2,000 calories a day for me for a month? And let's see what happens. And if your body weight's exactly the same, well, if your goal is to lose fat, we need to shave off 200 a day. If you need to put on muscle, let's add 200 a day. Let's watch it again for a month. Now, if in the case of like a fat loss person, we've dropped calories 200 a day for a month and they don't lose any weight, I go, okay, that's strange. Let's drop it another 100. So we're 300 down from what was a month of maintenance because we demonstrated a month of maintenance. But say they don't lose weight again. That's when you simply go, Occam's razor, you're fibbing. You're not accurately measuring, because there's no way we can shave off 300 a day from a proven maintenance level and have no change in the needle. So I'm all about track it. Let me see how your body performs. And I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in your body just because I read some calculations on a computer or in a textbook. I just get you to fix something, which is your calorie target and a rough spread of macros, and do a really good job measuring what you eat and show me what you did for a month, and let's see what happens. And then we'll make a tactical decision based on the information we've gleaned from your body and your habits.
Interesting. But how, that's really cool way of looking at it, because you're like treating everyone as an N equals 1, which is, I suppose, it sounds like that's your kind of overall philosophy. It's like, look at the individual, look at how they're responding. And I know that gets said a lot in high intensity training, but I like how you almost put everything aside and you just look at, okay, what is actually working objectively right now for this person? How important do you think, because it's interesting. I've obviously had a few people on the show recently talking about, is a calorie surplus really important to maximize muscular gain? I appreciate you do treat everyone as an individual, but in terms of your overall belief, do you feel that, having a somewhat of a calorie surplus, once you do realize what someone's maintenance calories are, that's important to optimize for muscle mass?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's as critical as people think, but I definitely don't think you're going to put on much muscle at a deficit. Everyone knows if you're at a deficit, you're going to be in a shortage of calories to fuel the body. You're going to be in a shortage of protein to replace damaged, muscles and things like that. And you're probably going to be in a shortage of vitamins and minerals because there's simply not enough volume of food going through your body to kind of capture the nutrients you need. But it doesn't mean you can't magically force feed gains, you know what I mean? And I've probably learned that the hard way. Like, muscle growth's very slow and steady, and as long as you're roughly about maintenance and a little bit above, up it goes. And that's why I love metrics, because my lead indicator is you're getting more reps every week and then using more weight. So as long as you're satisfying that, no matter what you're doing with your eating, we're moving in the right direction. So it's kind of depends on what's the most critical factor for you. So for me personally, like, muscle's kind of like a given. Like, I don't have to stress about it. I just need to follow the routine, sleep properly, and it sort of steadily comes, even this late in the game. But for me, like, keeping body fat in check's like an absolute problem. So I'm a classic, like, sort of endo-mesomorph, you know what I mean? Big and fat, and I can basically eat without pulling myself up. So for me, like, my drama is never about muscle mass. It's, if I want my abs to show, I have to have like bulletproof oversight about the quantities of food going in my body. And it's really simple. Like, if I string together, 1,800 to 2,000 calories a day for sort of, 50 to 70 days in a row, I will be in beach condition. That's what I've proven with the data. That's what I need to do. If I'm not showing abs, guess what? No matter how accurate I think my MyFitnessPal was, it wasn't. You know what I mean? So if your problem's the opposite, where you're trying to put on size, it's just test and see. So one of my more hard-gaining clients at the moment, like the one I spoke about before, where we've added more rest days, that's kept his strength going up from a previous plateau. We're now starting to push calories up to sort of 25, 26, 2,700, and we're just going to see what happens over the month. But he doesn't really get fat. If anything, he's actually he looks leaner whilst being stronger and more muscular, which is an awesome problem to have, but it's not the problem I have. I get puffy very quick.
That's interesting because, I look at you and I go, oh, I'm envious of Gary's gains. And it's like they say, you always want what you don't get naturally, but you don't really care about what you have naturally. So Skylar often talks about his vertical jump. He's never had a problem, I think, dunking a basketball. And I've never had a problem getting a six-pack, but do you look at sometimes people that can get ripped very easily and you look at them in that kind of envious way, or? Oh,
like yes and no. Like, you can't complain about the the result you got for the work you didn't do. So, I mean, I know how to get shredded. I've been there before. If I'm not shredded, it's not an accident. So I'm not going to sit there looking at people and going, oh, it's easy for them to be shredded, because I don't really care about the excuse at the end of the day. Like, the process is very, it's very simple. Like, just follow the rules. Pay attention to the evidence, have oversight, and even if you are someone who loses fat, or it's difficult for you to control your eating, like, you have to do it if you want it. And having this attitude where you kind of blame your genetics on everything is just, it's not taking responsibility for your life. It's a silly way to think. It's not constructive. So I tend to not indulge it too much. And it's kind of the guys that are big and shredded. That's probably the dudes I'm envious of. I'm like, man, that dude's a monster and he's shredded as hell. Like, what the hell? Like, but it's not his genes, or it's not my genes. It's my behavior. So especially with conditions. So muscular size is very cruel in terms of genetics. Some people are just handed the lottery. Some people are given a raw deal. Everyone can improve, but there's wild variance. But when it comes to body fat, I mean, I understand that everyone's got different temperaments and personalities about how they handle food, but it's much easier to dial down calories and drop body fat than it is to get your dream level of muscle mass. So your muscle mass is capped, but your body fat, you can bring that down. Everyone can bring that down if they just be scientific about it.
Do you want to talk about your personal transformation story, and then we can go on to the Muck Shredded experiment? Or we can go, depending on which way round you want to do it.
Yeah, no, we'll go in chronological order. So I did the McShredded at the back end of my transformation story. So when I was a young fella in uni, put on plenty of muscle, didn't put on much fat. And that's kind of the nature of being young. You tend to, your hormones at the time just sort of make you a bit of a furnace. But later on, when I was trying to really push for size, I had this sort of strange idea in my head that I'd have to eat, lots and lots of calories. I believe that if I force-fed myself, that it would ramp up my muscle gains. And it was when I got into HIT as well. But at the end of the day, like, if you look at the muscle gain versus the fat gain, all I really did was turn myself into a buff sumo. I blew up to about 125 kilos in my early 20s, so almost to the point where you're looking a little bit unhealthy in terms of fat gain. I was very strong, very muscular, so, I mean, it's sort of like a double-edged sword. But when I sort of decided that, I didn't sort of want to base my self-esteem on muscle size and more on my sort of aesthetic appeal, I was actually having a conversation with one of my best mates about sort of HIT training versus, whatever he was doing. And I just realized that no matter how logical what I was saying was, it just wasn't sticking. And I think people have a bias to kind of, if you look good, they'll listen to what you say. And it's pretty hard to get past that point most of the time. So when I was talking to my friend about this, he sort of listened for a bit and he sort of said, what would you know? You're a fat C word, as minus talk, and cut me down pretty hard. It was like a bit of a wound, you know what I mean? And that was kind of like this really strong moment where I won't get angry at someone if they say something offensive and also true. So I wasn't even like upset in the way that like, oh, you arsehole, I can't believe you said that. It was more like, yeah, that's actually how people think. How he thinks is a normal human bias. And if you want to spread the message out about how effective your training is, you need to fully account for all the biases people have about it and answer those objections. So basically from that moment, my fitness pal came out. I started looking at calorie totals, shot for about 2,300 and stuck it every day. 8 months later, I was down to about 94 kilos from 125. So you're looking at a full transformation, 30 plus kilos off the body, doing nothing more than getting the math right and having kind of the psychological priming, I guess, to kind of be like, well, why is this important? And it probably wasn't even, my desire to look pretty. It was probably my desire to be influential and share these ideas in a way that was kind of gave you a shorthand to communicate them. So instead of trying to push HIT from a position of weakness where you're not in great shape, even though you're muscly, deliver it as a fully completed product. So I got really, really ripped. And then, the next thing, that same friend wasn't asking me about how I trained. He was asking me about, was I on something, and accusing me of taking steroids because, you could see all the muscle that I already had, but it couldn't possibly be just, tactics. It had to be some secret source, because it was quite a dramatic change. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. So I guess there was that big kind of, that psychological moment where you're like, oh, that stung. Okay, let's do something about it. Follow the plan, 30 kilos off. And it turned out HIT had built a lot of muscle underneath. So it was good to see it.
That's awesome, man. Do you want to talk about the McShredded diet that you did?
Yeah, so I sort of got down to 95 kilos, hovered around there for a year or two, and then in 2014, got tickets to go to the Mr. Olympia. So I got the silver ticket so that I got to meet everybody and things like that. So the last thing I wanted was to be walking around meeting all my favorite people from YouTube and from the bodybuilding world, not being in really good shape. So I'd proven already that calories is the most important thing, and I'd been pretty loose in terms of macros. I honestly didn't really know. I just shot for calories and left the rest. So I just thought, a lot of people talk a lot of waffle about eat this type of food and food quality and meal timing, and I just wanted to kind of, as you already know, this kind of idea of measure, track, and demonstrate on yourself or on others is more important than, whatever the fancy blog article or Flex magazine article or textbook tells you. So I wanted to kind of be very, very cheeky and go, okay, so I've got 50 days before I fly out to America. Let's eat McDonald's and let's do it with a calorie target. And let's see what happens. And luckily, because I was working in the mines, I could get blood work for free. So I actually got blood tests before, middle, and after, because the doctor at the time was like, oh, this sounds cool. I'll put these tests through for you. You know what I mean? So I haven't got them with me, so I can't read them out and break them down. But basically, I was in pretty good health already, and it didn't change. It didn't move in either direction in 50 days. So the basic plan was I go into McDonald's every night, intermittent fasting, eat once a day. And that was pretty much just to batch it because I didn't want to go back and forth to McDonald's. So I'd have, this is where it gets great. This is where the story, so instead of teaching people rules, tell them a story. So this is where it gets interesting. So every night I'd go into McDonald's or the drive-thru and I'd order a double quarter pounder, an M&M Minis McFlurry with an extra shot of M&Ms because I like to party. Then I'd get 2 chicken salads, and basically that was, maybe for health reasons. And I think those, 3 or 4 cherry tomatoes probably stopped me getting, an old world disease like scurvy. So that was kind of like my backstop for my health, something a little green and red and colorful. And then I'd finish off with like a box of cookies because cookies, McDonald's cookies, they're amazing. Hit me right in the childhood heart. So I did that every night for 50 nights in a row. So all the ladies at McDonald's got to know me. And weird turn of events, I lost 7 kilos in 50 days. So it was the best I'd ever looked by a huge margin. I'd never been that shredded. Hilarious. I'd never stuck a diet with that much adherence. And I think it was just a case of, working with my inner fat kid, So at the end of the day, I went in, put my favorite foods in, and stuck it. So it's probably not technically a perfect diet, but it shows you that calories are king. Meal timing is irrelevant. Food quality is probably a little bit important, but, over 50 days, nothing too bad can go wrong. Stick that number, and the maths panned out exactly how I thought it would.
Interesting. So I guess from a fat loss perspective, it was highly effective for you.
Incredible.
So one meal a day, how many calories would there be in that meal then?
Sort of 1,800 to 2,000 was about what it was every day in the MyFitnessPal, yeah.
And it was the same thing every single day?
Yeah, I just didn't deviate. Keep it simple, batch it. Even your decisions should be batched. It's like I don't need to sit there window shopping for food. I'm just going to hit the same thing every day.
Oh,
Done.
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of batching. We can link up the batching podcast in the show notes.
Yeah, I got to learn to do it first.
But yeah, like it works really, really well. Like if you can simplify your diet plan to that extent, it can work incredibly effectively. And like you say, like eating the same things every single day, and maybe having, okay, you didn't do it in this case because you had a very strict plan and a very good, you had a real goal in terms of, a goal you're very motivated about. But some people can relax on the weekends, and then so long as they are constant Monday to Friday, that tends to work quite well too. But no, that's fascinating. But yeah, I mean, I'd love, if you can dig it up, I don't expect you to find it, but if you can dig up your kind of high level blood work, I'd love to be able to put that in the show notes if we can.
Yeah, no worries.
But
I'll try and find it.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't, don't worry. But I'm just thinking, like, my opinion would be that long term, there would be definitely some. Well, I believe there'd be some downside to certain markers of health, but purely from a fat loss perspective over that time frame, that's really interesting, and I can see why that would work.
What I would say now, I'd like to pull you up is instead of saying, oh, I think that this would happen, it's like, well, Lawrence, go do 150 days and take blood work and let me know, because too much of the fitness world is people just kind of guessing, speaking from a textbook, from a guy who read a textbook and copied that textbook before the textbook. And I think it's really important to be the practitioner. So a little bit of that Tim Ferriss kind of self-experimentation, I think people need to do a lot more of. And it allows you to take more accountability, and it allows you to warranty your speech a little bit better. So when I sort of say calories are king, I don't say it because some other guru told me. I say calories are king because guess what? I did it for 50 days, and I ate McDonald's once a day, and I had an M&M Minis McFlurry with a double shot, and this is what happened. So my speech is warranted by something I personally accounted for and experienced. And the more you can do that when you're trying to sort of communicate expertise and trying to help other people, I think the better the outcome's going to be. Because if you repeat, imagine if you sort of, periodization is another one. I mean, that is like holy writ. It is holy writ to challenge the idea of periodization. I mean, the whole industry, when you do a PT certification, you have to show like a periodization plan, and it's just insane. It's like, demonstrate it, show me how you demonstrated it before you tell me about it.
I appreciate you challenging me on that, and I am excited about doing a lot more N=1 in the future and sharing that on the blog and with you. But doesn't that kind of fall down though when you're like, well, okay, I did it on myself, so I can say this worked for me, but how do you know if that works for other people? You have to do N=1 on every person, right?
True.
So you have to speculate at the outset, and then actually take action with that person, and then you can only form an opinion once you have the data. That's your
correct
philosophy.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of humbling. It's accepting that you can't see everything until after the fact. But once you get some facts, you make small changes and kind of go from that position. So stay humble, measure small changes, and only speak really about what you've done and what you've demonstrated as much as possible.
That's incredibly liberating, actually, because I guess now that I'm providing an online coaching service, it's, I know there's a number of approaches that I know to help people get results, but it's like it kind of simplifies things if you assume that actually I don't know much at all until we actually start implementing X, Y, and Z and then tracking. So yeah, it's really helpful for me to be reminded of that, like learn that at this point in my career. So that's really cool. Okay, so is there anything you want to kind of add to that, or do you want to move on to? I've got some questions around the kind of personal training approach for the trainers out there.
No, we're all right to move on. Hey, I mean, you've had so many good guests talking about HIT. There's plenty of info out there, so it's probably done and dusted. So we might as well move on to, I guess, the unique things I can talk about when it comes to my experience as a PT.
Cool. I was going to say we've obviously touched on how you measure people's progress and how that kind of informs the strategy. I'm just looking at the things we mentioned here. You got the psychological priming. Do you want to just elaborate on what that means and your approach to personal training in general, and then we can get into the details?
Yeah. So one of the things with HIT is often the people that are into it, they already get into it as very motivated individuals. So it attracts people that are very, very hungry for tactical advantage. So it sort of automatically pulls in go-getters. But when you then become a personal trainer, you have to account for the full spectrum of personalities. And you got to realize that having a wonderful method of doing things doesn't mean anything unless you can encourage people to make a sustained effort at it. So when it comes to, say, the term psychological priming, it's really sort of having those deep conversations and digging down as to what someone wants in terms of a description of their body, but also why they want that. What is that change going to mean in terms of how they feel? So I'm very interested in Jordan Peterson, who's the guy who created self-authoring. And basically self-authoring is sort of like guided journaling, and it's a plan to kind of help people sort out their lives. So I was a bit inspired by one of the exercises in that program called the Heaven and Hell exercise. And basically I've ported the program and changed it around a lot to be focused on a physique transformation. So I've got this product that I'm sort of testing at the moment, and the first exercise is the Heaven and Hell exercise. And the idea is you're asked all these questions about your body, and you're creating a vision of heaven. So you're basically trying to say, listen, what would my best body look like? How would I feel if I looked after myself for the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, got myself in amazing shape? How would this affect how I see myself, how others see me, how my friends and family see me? What potential things could come of getting my body in great shape and having more energy, and just kind of like setting up that vision of something to really strive towards. And then the other part of that exercise is sort of writing about a hellscape. So like, what would it mean if I just keep being a 40-something-year-old fatty that eats and drinks and parties in London like I always have? And what am I going to look like in another 12 months of neglecting myself? Am I going to deteriorate even further? Is the belly going to get bigger? Am I not going to have enough energy to play with the kids? So basically, when it comes to psychologically priming people, I give them this activity, and they're literally writing 1 or 2 pages on the sort of heaven scenario for their body in its best shape and what it would mean to them, and then the hellscape, which is something to put a bit of fire under their toes. So when you ask people these really deep questions and especially get them to write about it, so having to put pen to paper, it's a really effective way to kind of draw out thoughts. So most people's thoughts they're like sort of these amorphous blobs in their heads, these little moments of anxiety that they have when their body's out there in the wild. But when you ask them really focused questions and they're having to kind of articulate how they feel about them, it kind of brings everything to a head. And I just find that if you don't set people up like that, it's just very hard to get a running start. And you as the trainer kind of have to, it's like you're always pushing them to this point, but I want that to be internal. Like I love when clients come into the gym and they know what day it is, and they know what exercises are coming for the day, and they remember what number they got last week and how many reps. And I don't even know, because I'm yet to look at the log sheet. That's kind of what I'm trying to do when it comes to psychological priming. I want people to get really invested in their metrics, in their numbers, so that all that I'm doing is watching, counting reps, making sure they don't get cheeky with the form, and making sure that they can string the process together enough times, 3 to 6 months worth of, focused effort to produce the results they want. So that's psychological priming, the Heaven and Hell exercise.
Love it. Love that. Stealing it.
Yeah, I did have a giveaway for it, but I've got a restriction on my autoresponder that I can only do 1 lead page at a time. So when I upgrade to the next thing, I'll make that available to everyone, and you can steal it, use it, go for it.
Cool. No, that's fascinating, and it totally makes sense to me. And like, I've actually done a very similar exercise a couple of times, which is the fear setting exercise in the 4-hour work week that you probably might be familiar with from Tim Ferriss. And I did that exercise when I worked out, what I was going to do in my future career. I looked at like, okay, so if I stay in IT sales for the next 10, 20 years, what does that mean? What am I losing out on? What am I not doing? And when you write that all out, and then you write out the upside of what it means if actually you do take that leap to do what you're passionate about, and then you do the last bit of the exercises to figure out, worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, what do I do? And in my particular situation, it was, well, if my podcast or blog or personal training, whatever it is, business doesn't work out, then I can always go back into IT sales and earn close to 6 figures. Like,
pretty much,
boo hoo, it's not a big deal. Obviously, I had a slightly different situation. I didn't have a mortgage. I don't have children. I do appreciate that those do create some complexity, but we all have a couple hours every day or an hour every day where we can put some time into what we really care about. I don't think anyone really has an excuse. Just watch less television. Anyway, I don't want to go off on a rant, but
you're right. I don't mind.
But it just really resonated with me what you said, because I've done that exercise in the 4-hour work week, and that was very impactful and helpful for me. And when you do it, you feel so empowered. You're like, what have I got to lose? Let's just do this. It's very underrated. So. Okay, so that's awesome. So, you've done that exercise. You've got the client to fill that out. How do you communicate your training and health approach to your new clients?
Yeah. So basically, if you're in a box gym like I am, you're meeting people typically through some form of lead generation, be it they've a gym induction or they've bought like a cheap 2 sessions for the price of 1 deal. And it's kind of, all sorts of people are thrown in front of you. But I mean, the pitch is pretty much always the same. So I always use the big 5 workout roughly. So 5 or 6 exercises covering a full body workout. And kind of at each of those exercises, I'll kind of talk about one thing. But even before we go up to the gym floor and do that, I sort of sit down, and I think the first thing you have to do is just find out things about people. Like, let them talk, let them run their mouth for a little bit, get all their thoughts, fears and worries out of the door. And you almost don't need to talk back to people for 5-10 minutes at a time. And if there's one bit of advice I can give personal trainers is just, I literally will sit down and go, tell me your life story, or, fill me in on you, and just let them run. And they feel like they have to run on because it's such an open question. So once you sort of get that, that's when all these snippets of information come at you. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like to pitch HIT to people, you have to very, very quickly demonstrate your view of the world. So the first thing I kind of explain to people is that, muscle mass is health. So the first thing I'm going to say to someone is listen, don't get bogged down on this idea of cardiovascular health or fitness. Think of youth as muscle mass. So what it means to be an old, frail person, be it man or woman, is it means your muscles have shrunk away, your body's, scooped over, and you're like an old little crone, everything's bent and crushed, and you're not vital, and it's hard to pick up the shopping, and it's hard to go upstairs. So what it means to be healthy is to have lots of lean muscle tissue, be strong, be vital. That's kind of my image of health and my image of youth. And even if somebody's not trying to be like a bodybuilder big, to be bodybuilding big, it sort of doesn't matter, because for the most part, their genetics is going to cap their muscular size far below what they think is going to happen. So it's like an existential threat. So I sort of explained that at the onset. Is just that muscle mass is what it means to be young. Strength and strength capacity is what it means to be a young person. So in the gym where I'm at, I mean, the sort of medium age is sort of 35 to 45. And that's kind of the right way to speak to those people, because they're at that point in their life where they're not young, they're not arrogant that their body's bulletproof, and they are kind of looking just for health, but they're not quite sure what that means. So if you can just sort of get across the line, muscle mass and strength is youth, let's get as much of it as we can now and hold it for as long as possible so that you don't age prematurely. And then the other thing is risk factors. So you just talk about the fact that most forms of exercise, they tear up the joints. Running on pavement, playing sports, the amount of injuries those things produce. And half the time, it seems like every second person I know these days has some kind of like ACL injury or cruciate ligament injury. It's like it's so much like damage in these bodies. And that's really good because it's something to really pitch a safe and effective training method to. So I explained to them that all that exercise is training muscle fiber. So all we're doing is contracting muscle fiber, and that's all the body understands. So we're going to find a way to contract it safely, but also push it to the point that the body's given a reason to change and adapt. So I basically don't mention HIIT. I just say, listen, I'm going to teach you to work safely, smooth and controlled. We're going to use a cadence, going to move in 4, lower in 4, which allows me to measure what you're capable of. And this is going to keep your joints safe, and it's going to encourage your body to move in the right direction. And because we're going to be super strict about form today, I'm able to measure you, and your journey is going to be nothing more than improving that metric over time to as high as your genes allow, and we'll hold it for as long as possible, and that'll make you younger and keep you younger. So that's kind of the first 5-10 minutes of conversation before we even hit the gym floor. Depending on my flow state at the time, I may be more or less elegant in speaking of those things, but the basic is muscle mass and strength is a young person. Joint and connective tissue health is the long-term problem that most forms of exercise cause, and they'll automatically have a story of their sports injury that they'll link it to, so it's perfect. Yeah. And then we're going to come to the gym floor, and I'm going to teach you how I measure strength in a way that relates to your lean muscle mass. And that's when I start sort of dropping the big 5 workout on them.
Awesome. Do you ever find you have to kind of preface what you say with, because I sometimes have to do this. It's like you kind of have to say, I'm about to tell you something that you're not used to hearing, or something to that effect before you start on your usual script, or I know it's not a script, but script pointers. Yeah.
So most people I've encountered are pretty open-minded. But some people are like highly disagreeable, and it's like pulling teeth sometimes. It's like finding that common ground is like really, really difficult. But half the time with those people is you have like an awkward conversation where you're just like, oh man, this person is hard to get things through to. Then you go do the workout, and by the end of the workout, they trust everything you've said. So you say everything that's going to happen, you deliver everything properly, and then they kind of understand that this is my main objective in a workout, and I'll even say it to people, is I want to show you that you've never worked out hard, not even once, not ever. You have never done any hard work physically in your life until you've come with me. And I back that promise up 100%. Teaching normies to take a set to failure, it'll back up everything you say, because they've done 12 reps on a leg press till their legs are wobbling, they're screaming, you're telling them to do more even though they want to quit. You do that a couple of times with someone, and they understand what you mean by hard work replacing faffing about. And I'll literally say that phrase. I'll just say, hard work replaces faffing about, and that's what I'm going to show you today: hard work and measurement. So to be honest, most people are pretty open-minded, but often I will preface. But I think that the preface is your unique selling point. So the fact that you're not white rice as a personal trainer is a really powerful thing. So I love being, having this sort of antagonistic view or the sort of rebellious view of exercise, where I sort of come in and say, listen, I sit on the fringe of exercise science. Most of the stuff I'll show you today, I can't talk with other fitness professionals because it's either too confusing or too offensive. But just keep an open mind with me, and I'll show you a few things today that'll get you in the right direction. So I think it's an advantage. The preface is just saying, listen, I've got something, it's like an intrigue pitch, you're sort of framing it for intrigue. Here's a weird little thing about the body that's always there, and once you do it, you'll realize what I'm talking about, but no one's really identified it properly in the industry. So welcome to hard work. Welcome to no fun reps. So that's kind of what I do.
That should be your domain. Welcome to nofunreps.com.
Yeah, I tell the people there's no fun reps here. I don't care. You know what I mean? Because it's important to if you say, like with HIT, like often we think we have to win everybody over. I don't give a shit. Like I just want someone who's high performance, high IQ, preferably affluent so they can stick out 3 to 6 months or permanent training with. That's who I want to serve, because I'm not there to twist people's arm. I'm not there to pull teeth. I'm just, who's my people, who can see the world in terms of metrics and hard work. What's their A-type personality going to be like? That's who I want my tribe to be. So when it comes to training people, I'm not trying to kind of like ease them into HIT. I put the fire hose on them and I just go, take this. And if you like it, we're going to get along really well and we're going to have a great journey. If it puts you off in any way, shape or form, you're not going to ask for PT. And that's okay. That's good. That's a good result because you don't waste anyone's time. You know what I mean? So be really authentic and give them a brutal first workout and test people, test their limits, because you're not going to train them any other way than what you do. Like people don't get to come in and do, volume training, or they don't get to come in and have an easy periodized day with me. And that doesn't happen with me. It's just hard work. So I'm just going to demonstrate a really hard workout. And if you love it, cool. If not, that's the best outcome.
Metrics and accountability. Do you want to elaborate on that? And you've put in brackets here, capturing peak performances and mastering dopamine. Is that okay? I don't know if you were already kind of talking about that, or whether that was coming next.
Oh, no, we can get to it. So how I pitch during the session is sort of after a few sets or two, I just say, look, so as you can see, moving slow and controlled doesn't reduce the effectiveness of a workout, although on paper it might sound like moving slow and moving gently is a soft way to train. But if we move slow and gently with the 4/4 cadence, go to failure, we get really hard inroad on the body, give it a reason to change, and we can measure it. And my job as a trainer is essentially to never waste a workout. So I don't periodize with you. Every performance with me for 3 to 6 months, it better be your best. Your delta better move up. That is my expectations. And except for the odd exercise, maybe every couple of weeks, that's the typical experience clients have with me. So I teach them good form early on. I push them hard early on. I get their peak performance every single workout, because my job as a personal trainer is to remove the opportunity cost. So the biggest problem most people have, so say if someone does a set in their complimentary session or the first session with me, and they so clearly stopped 3 or 4 reps short of failure. They just said, nah, I can't do any more. They lowered it in 4 and just chose to not do another one. I actually use that as a teaching point, and I just say, listen, you voluntarily stopped, didn't you? And they'll go, yeah, it's getting a bit hard. And I say, this is a good thing, because what I want to point out to you is that your brain is biased to duck out of hard work. Your brain wants to quit on you because it wants to conserve calories. And this is the reason most people don't train in a HIT style, because their brain is not wired for it. When you're out in nature, you don't throw a spear at your enemy with a cadence. You hurl that thing, leverage as much speed as possible to create an outcome in nature, and do it with as little expenditure as possible. Training empirically is the opposite. We have to go to failure to get maximum benefit. We have to go to failure and use a cadence to get a good metric, a high resolution metric. And if we can string together enough peak performances, I should be able to tap out your genetic potential in sort of 6 to 12 months. If you train by yourself, you won't even, if someone chooses to not train with me after that point, they know themselves they're never going to produce a workout like the one I just gave them. They're never going back there. They're probably going to down-regulate by 50%, and they're just going to tick along, maybe add a little bit more volume and just coast along at that level. And so what I'm trying to explain to them, that all those moments where they've chosen to stop, and the moment where they chose to stop is probably far above what they've been doing prior to meeting me. So they're already far beyond what they usually do, but I can take them even further. I just explained to them that that's an opportunity cost. If you string together another 12 months of that attitude, what have you left on the table over those 12 months? So I'm not interested in how much time you spend in the gym. I'm interested in that delta. How far are we going? How strong are you going to get? And how quickly are we going to do it? Not the amount of time we wasted being a gym hero and playing on our phones and doing 4 or 5, pussy sets. It's all about getting that delta up. So my job as a PT is essentially to close the opportunity cost right off. When you train with me, we are going 100%. You will string together peak performances and you will hate yourself if you don't get them. That's what I want from people, and that's what I do. So you have to be really aggressive, put the foot down with people. But I can tell you right now, most of the people that train with me, the style of training picks A-type people. You know, I train lots of CEOs, lots of sort of business owners, people that are already into metrics, into being time efficient, just as a natural state of being. But they become as personally invested in the workout results as I do. If they don't get their number, they'll sit there sometimes and chastise themselves without me having to say anything. And I just sit back and just say, good, remember this moment. It's beautiful. That's it.
Yeah, I would enjoy working with that type of person.
That's our job. Like anything else is neglecting. Like, it's just a waste of money. Like, why would you see a trainer to just hop on the treadmill or play around the gym floor or just to work up a little sweat? It's so insane what most of the industry's like. I'm not about that. You come to me because we're going to do it as fast as humanly possible. There's no other option for you.
I love it. Yeah, no, it's, I love the way you used opportunity cost. I use that all the time in life when talking about, you know, all sorts of different, you know, habits and activities that we all have in daily life. But I've never used it in the context of exercise. So to hear it used, it totally makes sense, is really interesting, because you are, you know, if you are exercising in a way that is very inferior or very suboptimal, then it's just going to take you much longer, if you ever even get there, to get to the same destination. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So, okay, talk to me about in-person training versus online coaching and how you marry the two.
Okay, so in a nutshell, online clients get better results than one-to-one clients. And it's very, very frustrating. And I think it's a lot to do probably with how you can qualify people. So typically, if someone wants to be trained online with me, they're already very aware of what I do. They've probably done a little bit of HIIT before or done a lot, and they're just looking to kind of, you know, upgrade their focus and effort and sort of have a coach to drive the process and keep them accountable. So the online people just seem to be better at managing things almost automatically, like instinctively. But in a lot of ways, like, online training's really lateral. So you have to solve all these problems outside of just what's the workout look like. And as HIT trainers, we're so myopic about how amazing our little sort of niche of exercise is that we fail to see all the other factors that go into making a body look good. So with an online client, for the most part, it's an aesthetic goal. Like you're basically trying to teach them to manage calories. That's like the one thing you got to get right to make them look good. As long as they look good, they'll be happy. And that's, I think that should be the primary goal for everyone, like irrespective of total muscular size. If they look good, they're going to be happy with fitness and they're going to adhere to their routine very, very easily. So I found that people that did the online training, because it was centered on sort of a very simple model. So my model is so simple, it'll amaze you. I have a Facebook group. It's called the Intense Gains Accountability Group. When you come into the group, I make a really shitty video where I literally hold up a picture of your name scrawled in a pen, and then I tell you, you're going to do 2 things for me every single day. At the end of the day, you're going to give me your MyFitnessPal total calories that you consume for the day, post a screenshot of it, and then you're going to stand on the scales, show me your ugly toes or wear some socks, and show me what the readout is on the scales. And you're just going to do that every single night. And that's just going to allow me to get information about what happens from month to month. And I'm just going to tell you to adjust the calories up or down based on what happened. If we end up getting to a low number and the needle's not moving, I'll give you a really harsh conversation where I talk about how you're obviously guesstimating or you're fibbing, and we need to really sort out how accurately you're making those measurements of your food. But for the most part, most of these guys, they're losing 5 or 10 kilos in sort of 3 to 6 months without any kind of issue, as long as they follow the plan. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. And so why I use the term mastering dopamine, Facebook is a drug. see it more like crack cocaine than as a computer device. So every time someone gets a notification, gets a like, someone sends them a message, basically they get a little sort of happy burst in the brain. And it's a very dangerous thing when it's overused and for the wrong reasons. And this is when we talk about opportunity costs. Most people can build a 6-figure business in the time they waste on Facebook. But I use Facebook, and I hack Facebook because I know what a filthy little animal it is. I know how much you love it. So every time you post, Daddy PT comes into the picture and goes, like, or he says, great job, loving your work. Keep it coming. Let's see if we can hit below our calorie target going forward, but I'm happy with your consistency. So those little things train people to love this process. So accountability as a coach is about rewards. It's like, this is the right thing to do. It's a bit of a hassle. It's a bit frustrating to have to do all these things. But at the end of the day, you're going to get encouraged. You're going to get supported, and you're going to see that body fat come off your body. So Facebook and a Facebook group is such a powerful tool for changing habits. It just works really well. And then if everyone's got their notifications on, as everyone else in the group posts up and they see I'm making comments and encouraging them, and say they've been lax for a few days, all of a sudden 3 or 4 days of information gets posted up in one burst because someone's like, oh shit, I've been lagging, I've been letting myself down and the group down and my coach down. So my job is to affect change, to run positive interference on people and give them that support to kind of make those changes, because calorie counting is so simple. Everyone can do it, but most people don't do it. And if you can't do it, pay for a good coach to make you do it. You know what I mean? Like, put skin in the game to make you do it. So when you're not being watched by anybody, it's like when the boss goes away for 2 weeks. So things turn to shit. Jobs don't get done. Things just don't happen when the boss isn't watching you. So
the opposite.
Or the opposite, mate. Yeah, maybe you get more done because you're not constantly in meetings and bullshit like that. But I find that when you hire a coach, be it like a life coach or a PT who's really a life coach specializing in physical activity, you're finding somebody who's just able to kind of get you to do the thing you already know how to do. Like, everyone knows that if you eat less than you burn, then you're going to lose weight, but nobody does it. So all coaching is about is skin in the game. It's having someone putting pressure on you, investing a bit of time in you to get you to do the right thing enough times in a row to yield progress. So there's no magic to it. There's no, like, I don't need to write a secret book on how I get clients to follow their calories, but there's a lot of nuance behind that in terms of the sort of conversations and the priming and things you need to do with people to keep them on top of that process. And that's kind of the art of coaching. So I find that as an online model, it's that thing, like, it's so simple, like 2 posts, do it every day, be accurate, and let me guide you through the process. That's the business model in a nutshell. When it comes to one-to-one, I found that people come to you as a trainer, you deliver this excellent workout for an hour, and then you're on to your next client and you forget all about them. And they're sort of on your mind, but you don't know what they're doing behind the scenes. You may have had some conversations about counting calories and blah, 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 but there's no mechanism for you to have oversight of that. So all of my one-to-one clients, if they say to me, listen, getting this fat off my belly is important, I tell them, listen, I've got a process for it. And you're getting it for free. Usually you have to pay, £600 for 3 months for this thing. So if you're my one-to-one client and you want to follow this process, you get a really good deal. I do a lot of work for you that I'm not really paid for. And I get them to do this thing. And so I married the two sort of modalities between like direct supervision of a workout plus oversight of your nutritional plan and your nutritional habits. I put them together, and it's the sweet spot. It's the best mechanism for change because you get a world-class workout, which I can't replace. Like, I can't remotely coach you to deliver great HIT workouts. I've got a rough guess, and I hope that you're versed in it, but I can't guarantee that product. But I can get really good control over your eating habits. And if the primary goal is to look good, that's enough.
So what do I do? Just send it to you via PayPal or what? Like,
yeah, pretty much. But you don't really need to lose much fat. That's the only thing. So,
no.
Diet wouldn't be much more than getting you to force feed yourself a little bit. But training, you can always send me videos and stuff like that. But it's just kind of, Yeah, I mean, it's not hard. It's like I usually have a 15-minute Skype chat once a week on top of that just to check in with people. Half the time it works not because of what you say and when you say it. Half the time it's worked because someone's just put money down.
Yeah.
Like they've literally put skin in the game. And that's so important as a psychological step for people to take action. It's not funny. It's almost like 80% of the equation is that you paid to transform your body. You paid to transform your body. Like that is powerful because most people are cheap. They would not pay money for someone to like remind them to hit their calories for the day. They think it's not important or it doesn't matter. 10 years later, they're going to be fatter. But if you're someone who says, listen, I've had enough, I want a little bit of help, and you put that skin in the game, that's half the battle, hey?
Totally.
Yeah, it's half the battle.
Yeah, because you're right. If you pay what is a significant amount for that service or for the outcome, then you're far more likely to do it, right? It's just obvious. And it is strange. There's a real kind of cognitive dissonance, isn't there? Like people don't want to do it. I don't want to, spend 100 or 200, some people just don't want to spend that much. And I suppose I understand that if it's a large proportion of their income, but even for people who maybe it is somewhat of a large proportion, the return is huge.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it sounds harsh, but I've really stopped caring about what someone's income level is, even though like most of my clients are very, very affluent. Yeah. At the end of the day, I'm just like, do you want it? And I just pitch it. And if they don't take it, you got to put them off your shelf. Don't worry about them anymore. They'll come to you when they're ready. They'll make decisions, but you know what you offer, you know the value of it. And as a business person, you need to realize that price point, it's not just skin in the game for them, but it's skin in the game for you. So if you're not charging a respectable price for your services, guess what? You perform like a shit coach. If you put a nice high price, a nice, something that feels a little bit cheeky to you, if you do that, I guarantee that you'll get the right type of clients, they'll put in the work, get the results, and you'll perform much better as a coach. And you have to think like that. Do not think you can save everybody. Don't get excessively empathetic because someone's not in a position to afford your services, because you've only got so much time in the day and you have to prioritize people based on the amount of skin they're prepared to put in the game. So like when someone like pays me for online training or one-to-one training, I mean, the price is almost, it's a signal for their behavior more than it is my interest in money in some regards. It lets me know how serious they are. So I just see it as a measure of seriousness. If they don't want to pay the money or they balk at the price, then, I wish you well. That's the end of the conversation. Here's my YouTube channel, wing it. And that's it, and don't worry about it anymore. But I can tell you right now, like, you don't have time trying to twist people's arms into things. It's just life's too short. Hang around the go-getters, hang around the motivated people, make your circle, a motivating circle. I want to go to work as a trainer and I want to really love it. I want my clients to be coming there thinking that this is the best part of their week. Work sucks. They work really, really hard. They're full of stress, but they come to me knowing that, listen, I'm going to be a hero for the next sort of 35 minutes, put in some excellent efforts to take care of my health. And that's the process I'm interested in. And price is a way to make sure that happens. You know what I mean? So use it like that. And don't ever feel embarrassed or feel like you're a big arsehole because you're heartless about the cash point. Because nothing's worse when you're a PT, especially when you're a HIT PT and you love what you do, than having a dud client because your price point's wrong. You know what I mean? You just don't want that. Don't downgrade what you do. Work for cool, interesting, powerful A-type people. Become one yourself and have a good life. That's kind of it in a nutshell. Probably not a popular opinion, but I don't care.
Interesting. No, as well said, Gary. That's really, really interesting stuff. Okay, let's talk a little bit about state of the nation when it comes to high intensity training. Do you want to talk about your view on why there's a real lack in popularity of traditional high intensity strength training?
Yeah, so pretty much everything's in our evolution. So our brain is designed to conserve energy. We are designed to use our capabilities and leverage them in nature. So I sort of made that comment before that you don't throw a spear at your enemy with a cadence, because it would tap him gently and he would defeat you in combat. So in nature, in the environment, we're kind of lazy. Like, we're trying to be efficient in a biological sense of the word. So HIT is kind of, or the way I deal with it is empirical, and it relies on hard work. So it's automatically not suited for most people's thinking and most people's mentality and things like that. So when I talk about the fact that I train a lot of CEOs and business types, they're this tiny sliver of the population that's used to working hard, smart, and grafting. And they're wired in a way that's 2 to 3 standard deviations off the bell curve already. You know what I mean? So this idea that, and I used to be like this in my youth. I was just like, HIT gets treated like, like a holy writ, this book, and we're all like little Mormons running around trying to preach the holy word of, body by science to everybody. And I think we all just need to collectively relax, stop trying to win arguments, help people who want help, and the best way for that's price. You know what I mean? So now that I'm a businessman, like, I don't need to convince anybody of HIT except for the person who's put skin in the game. That's the only person that matters. And I'm going to spend every bit of energy helping them use my method to milk as much out of it as possible. I'm not interested in convincing somebody who's set in their ways. It's almost like politics. It's just like, listen, all you're going to do is not win the argument, or you're not going to convince them, and they're going to think you're an asshole. So with HIT, although I put it on strong and put my pitch on strong, it's nothing more than shaking the tree and seeing what falls out. And you only deal with the nuts that hit the ground. So I think with HIT, we need to realize that the human brain doesn't want to work hard. Most people don't want to work hard. Most people don't even join a gym. Like, the gym population is like, 1.5% to 3% or something in the UK. Like, it's tiny. Most people just don't even lift. They don't even exercise. So within a gym, it's already a tiny sliver of the population. And then the people that are going to train with this level of effort and intensity, they're even a smaller bunch again. So when you think about a HIT business, you only need 10 to 20 clients to be fully booked. That's it. That's your limit. So stop worrying about mass converting people and being right in all the conversations you have with people. Like, I don't talk about my training method with any of the other personal trainers in my gym. They don't care. They're not going to do what I say. I could show them the most valuable method of training that's ever been devised on earth. They won't even see it, and it'll be a completely pointless conversation. They're not going to change anything, so it doesn't matter. So when it comes to HIT, it's just make your pitch, do a good job of it, see who takes the bait. And one of the wonderful things about HIT, because it's very intellectual and it requires you to move past your brain's bias, usually it self-selects for high IQ. So you kind of get the top cream of the segment, to be honest, as just a natural extension of what you do. So I guess, the message is just calm down about being a hit warrior. Help people that generally come to you for help, and do a really good job of changing hearts and minds one at a time, only with people with skin in the game. That's your focus.
No, I love that, and that's really interesting, and it makes so much sense to not waste time trying to convert people who aren't going to be converted. And I've had that conversation with so many people, and I see it so much. People wasting time trying to convert people when you're better off. It's the same with anything. It's the same with trying to help someone become more entrepreneurial or fill in the blank. If they're not already somewhat preset to be that way, it's very, very difficult to convert them. And you can waste a ton of energy trying to do that when that energy could have been applied more productively elsewhere. So no, I totally agree. However, the challenge with that is that does mean we leave out the majority of the population, and it's not really helping public health and getting more, I guess, average people, should we call them, doing strength training. So, and I guess what would be ideal is high intensity training, because it's so efficient. So how do you think about that? Do you just not really care, or is there part of you that wants to raise awareness?
At the end of the day,
raise awareness.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, Mike Mentz's book's been out there for years. He's very popular. He's been in magazines. Doug McGuff's books, Body by Science, has been out there for a little while now. And at the end of the day, even if you watch a great speech delivered by him, getting people to exercise is like really difficult. Getting people to exercise hard is really difficult. So when you look at the metrics and you look at human behavior, you have to account for that. It doesn't matter how rational your approach to training is. You're dealing with a human being. They're very strange creatures and they don't like hard work. So when you sort of talk about making a public health pitch, like, you know, look at all the public health campaigns you've probably had over your childhood when they sort of have, you know, the old food pyramid where you have 60% carbs and this and that. It's like it's been published, it's fully aware, but no one follows it. They still go home and eat a pre-made meal or buy a pizza. Like education, it happens. I see it happening is one by one. Get in front of one open-minded, curious person at a time in the gym and take them on a journey. And then they'll recommend you to friends, and it's really just that small numbers game, especially if you're a HIT trainer. That's kind of your mission. And like I get, you know, like I've got a YouTube channel and I share videos and things like that, but guess who follows them and shares them? It's all the other guys in the HIT groups that have been Mike Mentz's fan since before I was born. You know what I mean? And here's a good example of the limitations of your influence. So say things like I'm new as a PT, but I suspect I'll have a decent career. Things like this podcast will sort of launch me up into new levels of success. And say I'm a bit of a rock star hit trainer in 4 or 5 years' time, and I can brag about a 6-figure or $1 million business from HIT in a couple of years' time. At the end of the day, there's people I've grown up with over my training life that know I'm really big. No, I'm really knowledgeable. Ask me how to train. Come with me for a HIIT workout and then don't do what I say. And these people like me. They know I'm speaking the truth. I took them through a HIIT workout and they're pussies. And they don't do it. And they don't even go back to the gym and they just quit because it's too hard. The mountain in front of them is just too fucking hard. And it doesn't matter how influential I was. My pitch was perfect. The training was delivered perfectly. They trust me. They like me. They're one of my best friends and they won't follow HIT. So you're telling me that you're going to get up there and preach and preach and preach and change public health models and change the way personal training is delivered and change the PT certification course. Shit's not going to happen like that. It's one at a time, one open-minded, curious person with a problem. You solve it personally. So the best thing you can do if you're interested in HIT is get really good at getting yourself into good shape. And then if you want to take it on as a business, which I'd say be really cautionary about because PT is a hard graft business. It is full of ups and downs. It is hard work. And you can be the greatest trainer in the world, and that doesn't mean you're going to be rich. You know what I mean? It is a hard, high failure career. But the best thing you can do is deliver one HIT workout at a time and get one body in great shape at a time, directly, hands-on or through online coaching, and just do it like that, that really personal connection, that high-value connection. That's how we kind of take HIT to the next level. Don't worry about trying to win arguments or challenge people in debates. You know what I mean? And I understand that like the mission maybe of this show is probably to popularize it, but it'll do the job. It'll be slow and steady. But like the best thing like this show would say do for me personally is I'll train someone in the gym, give them the pitch, and then I'll text them the podcast. And they'll listen to the podcast and they'll have a little bit more time to distill it, and they'll see the interaction of questions and seeing how you break down these things. And that's kind of how these things are really useful, in that they build authority for people to invest in the process.
Yep. So
it's small, tiny changes. Be humble about how much change you can affect and go for one person at a time.
Yeah, that's true. And it just gives them more context on the subject if they want that. But yeah, you're right. I guess I can't empirically say like, you know, the type of people that the podcast has influenced. Obviously, the vast majority are already into this way of exercising, and then they come across it and then they expand on what they're learning. I have had a few people who have like come across corporate warrior for the first time and then get into high intensity training, which is always great to see, but not very often. That's quite rare. But we'll see as things go on.
But those 4 or 5 people, if you get them into it, you get them results, you've done a great job. Like that's a really nice thing to do as a human being, is to show them how to train healthily and effectively and affect change in their life, even if it's 5 people in total. What an amazing thing to do. How many other people in the world have gotten 5 people into good shape? You know what I mean?
Very few.
They haven't even got themselves into shape.
Yeah.
You know? So it's a worthy thing to do.
Yeah, cheers. So what are you working on at the moment?
Yeah, so pretty much like I sort of shifted gyms a couple of months ago just to try like a more affluent area. And so basically I'm just building my business up from scratch, going pretty well, sort of north of maybe 10 or 11 clients now. Probably need to double that, and then I'm fully booked. So at the moment I'm just focusing on getting set up in the gym I'm in, but long term, I mean, I want to expand on the online coaching stuff a little bit more, but I want to really be like transformation focused. So with the online space, I think it's important to be really, really niche. So at the moment, a lot of it's sort of ex-clients or friends and family that sort of come into the mix. But I'll sort of be pitching because I sort of seem to have a natural affinity with the sort of CEO types and the high performance type people in the business community. That's what I'm going to focus on. So they tend to be the people that I enjoy the most. They tend to have a natural affinity for how I train and how sort of pushy and aggressive I am in a training session. So going forward, I'll probably try and specialize in sort of, training CEOs, training corporate warriors, for lack of a term, which is a great little term. I remember seeing it a couple of years ago and thinking that little oh my God, he got the word. He captured the word. Like such a good term. Like, especially when you come to London, like that is it. Corporate warrior. That's my target market right there. So license it to me. So that my focus going forward will be kind of like pitching down really hard on that avatar of sort of 40 to 50-year-old men, CEO types, business types, corporate warrior types, and just focusing on their problems and unique challenges and getting really good at that and establishing myself as the go-to guy for those kind of problems in the sort of London and possibly the online space. And again, I'll just be working on sort of online training products and things like that. But it's very hard to change countries and change jobs and start a new career, even though I have expert level knowledge of HIT, but that's not the same as being an expert salesman or an expert in dealing with people and their problems. So as a trainer, you have to acquire all these new skills. So I'm going to be focusing on kind of building up my skills in the areas of sort of selling, PT, as well as delivering sort of more of the problems around the edges, like dealing with emotions and family troubles and anything else that might upset a routine where you're trying to get peak performance. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. So doubling down on the one-to-one training, but also expanding my online business and then just seeing what happens, to be honest. So you have plans with these things, but life takes you in strange directions. But I think training is one of the big things I can give to the world. I'm very knowledgeable at it, very comfortable with it. So I think I'm in the right space to do the most kind of good in the world with this sort of stuff. So I'll see how far I can take it, essentially.
I was just thinking you have, from where I'm standing, you seem to have pretty good sales skills, but if you do want to improve those, probably the best way to do that would be to get some mentorship of some of your clients.
You have no idea. Like my current batch of clients at the moment, some of the conversations I have with these guys, I know that if I act on them, they're worth $100,000. They're just, I've got a guy that's, he runs like a landscape sort of architect firm. So basically like high-end gardens in the sort of the richer parts of London. And he's authored a book on designing gardens and things like that and got it published and won all these awards. And the sort of conversations we'll have about how you build authority, go out there and create a book, go out there and write articles for this magazine and that magazine and sort of build your authority and your profile. And even things like how to structure your day so that you can get a book finished. So I really do want to write a book, but I'll keep it under wraps as to what that book's going to look like. But essentially it's an authority builder and a lead magnet, no shame in it. It's just a creative way to plug how I can help a person and get them on board, because sales isn't slimy if you have a great product. So at the end of the day, like if I can't convince someone to come on board with me, I've failed them. If I can convince them to invest time with me, I'm going to do things that help their body like they would not believe. They're going to have the best 3 to 6 months of their life under my care, you know what I mean, when it comes to their physical health. So it's really critical to get good at sales, really develop yourself as a salesman, because what you deliver as a product is excellent. It is truly excellent. You're not just getting someone to overpay for perfume or something like that. You're really, you're buying back years of someone's life, and you're buying them tremendous amounts of happiness. So when you get a dude that's 40 to 50 to chuck on a heap of muscle mass and drop some body fat around the belly, I mean, you can't even measure that in terms of human happiness, because if you didn't intersect their life, they would have just got fatter and chubbier and just, aged quickly. So what you can do as a PT in terms of affecting change is one of the greatest ways you can serve another human being. And part of that is not just having the knowledge to deliver HIT and calorie controls, but it's having the personality and the rapport skills and the sales skills to really affect that change in another human being. And that's a complex set of skills. And I've been very humbled by my early experiences in PT about how important that is. So like HIT on this podcast and everyone listening, it's probably like that's what they've come here for. But as a personal trainer, it's a screwdriver in my toolkit. That's all it is. It's a screwdriver in my toolkit. It's a pretty efficient one. It's my trusty and my favorite one, but it's not that significant when it comes to sales skill. And remember, sales is all the way through the process. So you've got 3 to 6 months where you have to keep getting people and convincing them to follow certain ideas and habits in order to affect change. So my future is going to be learning and mastering those things so that I can get HIT onto more bodies, essentially.
Awesome. What's the best way for people to find out more about you, Gary?
Come to Facebook. So if they're listening to this, they know where your Facebook is or know where the Corporate Warrior thing is. I can give you a link for it, but it's literally my personal page. So just come and say hello, ask me a question. I am busy, but I'll get back to you, and just don't be an arsehole, but so don't try and sneakily draw out like every bit of information, even though I just handed it to you. So don't be, haphazard, but if you've got something that you really want to learn about, ask me a question. I'll give you an answer. I might even get on a coaching call with people for free. That doesn't worry me. So just reach out and talk to me. Like, again, HIT is not I used to have a YouTube channel that I'd have videos on, but I'd rather just have a conversation. I'd rather just chat on Skype with you about what your most pressing problem is, because that's the most efficient way to solve your problem. Sitting back and kind of telling you about HIT from your sort of platform doesn't have the same connection. It doesn't affect things the same. So come to my Facebook. It's just Gary Knight. You'll find me. There'll probably be a muscly picture or a picture in suits or something on there, and come talk to me. Otherwise, there's sort of intensegains.com. There's Intense Gains on YouTube. There's Intense Gains, the Instagram, and my old YouTube channel's The Epic Aesthetic. So they're all there, but personal contact, that's what I want.
And do you have did you say you have a giveaway for this episode? Yeah,
so I've got a giveaway. So I'm giving away a couple of different workout splits. There are some wild ones in there that are sort of more Dorian Yates style stuff, which are probably too much volume for most people, but they're there just in case people want to try them, all the way down to like a basic 5 workout. So you'll get that. There's also a video of a full body workout where I do an overdub describing all the things we talked about when it comes to cadence and measurement. And you're in there with me live in the gym while I do a voiceover and talk about all those things. So in terms of a teaching tool, it's not much better apart from me delivering a session for you. So you've got the workout logs, you've got a sample, video of how to do it. And then there's a bit of written text that might just surmise up your plan to get bigger. So that's in the giveaway.
Awesome. And obviously we'll link that up in the post. And for all the show notes, links, resources, everything that Gary and I have mentioned in this episode, and for the same for all episodes, please go to corporatewarrior.org. And until next time, guys, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Before you head off, head on over to corpwarrior.com. That's corpwarrior.com to get your free high-intensity training Google Progress chart and ebook with 6 interview transcripts of some of my top guests, including Dr. Doug McGuff, Drew Bay, and Bill Simone on how to optimize muscle gain, fat loss, and overall health in an efficient, effective, and sustainable way. These transcripts are deliberately not verbatim. Instead, they've been transcribed in an easy read format to make it more enjoyable and easier for you to quickly pick out what you need and start getting results. To get your ebook, head on over to corpwarrior.com, enter your email address, then check your email for an email from me with a confirmation link. Once you click the link, you will be instantly redirected to a PDF version of the transcripts. This episode is brought to you by the Resistance Exercise Conference, the science and application of strength training for health and human performance. Would you like to learn from the top strength training researchers, network and connect with other exercise professionals from all over the world, join a welcome reception on a Friday night to build relationships with other strength training professionals, experience an early morning workout from an expert trainer to kickstart your Saturday, and get inspired, rejuvenated and focused on your strength training business? I certainly do, and that is why I am attending and interviewing all of the speakers at the event. The Resistance Exercise Conference will be held on the 9th and 10th of March 2018 in Minneapolis, Minnesota at the Commons Hotel. To get 10% off your entry fee, head on over to resistanceexerciseconference.com, click the registration button and enter Corporate Warrior 10 in the promo code field in PayPal. I'm very excited about this and I've wanted to attend for years. Sign up now at resistanceexerciseconference.com and get 10% off with promo code Corporate Warrior 10, and I look forward to meeting you in person.